So this is a pretty cool population of house mice. They live on this island without constant human habitation, which is quite unusual. So we have maybe 2 of these island populations in the UK. And they've actually been studied for quite a while. We don't know exactly when they came onto the island, but it must have been several hundred years ago. There was a record of a lighthouse keeper in the 19th century who said that there were legions of mice who would just sit and stare at them. So they were definitely there for a while. And in the 70s, 80s, there were teams around ecologists, Becker and Triggs, who were really interested in these mice because they were living on this island and surviving. So they must have had somehow adapted to living in these harsh conditions. And they found that they were, so, for example, had huddling behaviors that allowed them to survive the harsh winters on the island. And so they were curious to see whether their genetic makeup had adapted so well to the island that bringing in another population of mice from a different island would mean that that new population wouldn't be able to survive. So they actually in the 80s, transferred animals from a different Scottish island onto the Isle of May and hypothesized that they would not establish themselves. But actually within half a year, the whole island was hybridized and now basically makes up this new hybrid population on the island. Now, why we're particularly interested in this mouse population is that they are the same species as we use in the lab. So we have all the tools available and all the knowledge from laboratory experiments in order to understand a lot more in depth how the immune system works and is shaped in a natural environment. So it allows us to bridge between ecology and immunology. This type of work involves a mix of field work, lab work, and computational analysis. So when we go to the Isle of May, which is an island off the east coast of Scotland, we tend to stay there for a week or longer at a time, and we go several times a year. And we have 3 separate grids where we put out live traps, so we can catch the animals live, and then we implant a little mini chip. Basically something that means that we can track them individually as you can do with a pet as well. And then we take measurements, body condition, but also fecal samples and a bit of blood, which basically means we can look at their health status and what the immune system is doing, and then release them back into the wild, which means that then when we recapture, we can understand how their immune system and their overall well-being is changing across time, and also measure the ecological variables that might impact that. So far, we've seen a huge amount of variation in their immune makeup, and we're currently disentangling what exactly it is that is driving that variation. But also, under a Home Office license, we are able to do experimental interventions. So we can, for example, treat them with antiparasitic treatment and then understand better what that means for the immune health of this animal. So overall, we believe that ecoimmunology, this field that sits between the laboratory immunology with very mechanistic insights, but under controlled conditions, and ecological study systems where it is more about understanding patterns that arise within the natural world and what impacts what. Using this unique study system of the house mouse, where we have all the tools and knowledge, and a very kind of contained island population of a wild animal, that this will help us bridge the gap between the very controlled settings and real life, and thereby hopefully complement more traditional laboratory methods as well as conservation research and ecology.